I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this cute panda block. So this is an applique pattern that is available for free at shinyhappyworld.com. Just go to shinyhappyworld.com and click on where it says free patterns, and you'll find him in the quilt patterns. So I'm going to show you how to make him, and for those of you who have done some of my patterns before, this is a new method that I'm using to give you some little extra marking lines to show you things like where the ears are positioned, exactly where the head goes on the shoulders. So even if you've done my videos before, this may have some new information for you. So the first thing that you're going to do, just like with any of my patterns, is print or trace the pattern onto paper-backed fusible adhesive. Now, one of the things that's new in the patterns is that for those of you who have electric cutters, there's also an SVG file that you can download of the pattern so that you can use that with your Cricut or your Silhouette or whatever electric cutting machine you have. But this is the pattern, what the pattern looks like that you'll use. For the SVG files, it just has the shapes. It doesn't have any of these lines, so you don't have to go in there anymore and erase all of those lines. For those of you who are fine cutting by hand, these are set up to print on paper-backed fusible adhesive. I use Heat and Bond Light, and it is already reversed and it's already exploded into the different pieces. So you can print this right on the paper side of your adhesive. So get it printed out or traced, whatever you like to do, and then roughly cut all the pieces out and fuse them to the back side of your fabric. And when I say rough cut, this is what I mean. You're not going to cut right on the lines. You're going to cut a little bit outside the lines. It doesn't need to be much. It can be just a sliver outside the lines. What you're doing is when you get this piece fused to the fabric, after you fuse it down, that's when you do the clean cut, and that means that your adhesive, the glue that holds this down and also keeps it from fraying, goes all the way to the cut edge of your fabric. There's not even one thread left without any adhesive on it. So you're going to rough cut and fuse all of the pieces down, and then you're going to do a clean cut. And clean cut means cutting right on all of these solid lines. And if you've done my patterns before, you knew that anytime I told you a dotted line, you cut a little bit extra. We don't have that anymore. Now I'm giving you an actual cutting line to cut. And this bit here is the seam allowance that's going to tuck under another piece. So now I've determined that seam allowance for you. So that explains what that marking is, but you're going to see a lot more markings. If you look at this, this has a lot more placement markings than what I usually have. So that's what I'm going to go through with you here, what all those markings mean, what the reason is for them, and how important it is for you to transfer them. And that really depends on your own preference. So here are all the pieces clean cut except for the ears. So the clean cut, as I said, is you cut exactly on that solid line. So here's what those markings mean, and here's what's important about them. So the most important marking for you to transfer, the one that I do myself, even though I drew this pattern and I could probably recreate it pretty well, I still always mark where the eyes go, because I know from drawing this design that getting those eyes in exactly the right place was the hardest part of the whole thing. I spend as much time getting the eyes where they go as I spend drawing the whole rest of the block. So I always, always, always mark on my pattern piece where those eyes are going to go. So in this pattern, you're going to have these eye patches go on top of the face, and then the eyes go on top of that. So I needed to mark two things. I needed to mark where the eye patches go on the face piece, and then I needed to mark where the eyes go on the eye patch pieces. So you'll see on the pattern, there's a dotted line, and I drew this really, really dark so you could hopefully see through here. But that line, that oval, I drew this blue oval, is inside the line. And I do that, instead of drawing right on the line, I draw inside it, because when I put these pieces on here, I don't want to have to worry about exactly covering that little bit of thing. I just want to know, yep, these go right about here, and make it really easy to cover them up. So the other thing to be careful of, in this case, for this panda, the patches are a little bit darker. A lot of times I do my markings with just a black fine tip Sharpie, but I'm pretty careful about that on applique pieces if they're not going to be black. The eyes are going to be black, the nose is going to be black, so I'm fine using a black marker for those because it's not going to show through. But I would normally not even use this darker blue here. I would use a chalk. I would use chalk. Something that can be brushed away, or something that's going to be a fairly light color that's not going to take a chance of showing through the applique piece that I'm going to place over it. So for this face, I always mark the nose, the eyes, and the nose, and the mouth. Those facial features are really important to get right. I mark the nose just with a black marker, and I mark it also inside the nose. You can see that my nose piece is bigger than my marking there, so I drew that also inside that nose shape. And I draw the line for the mouth right where I want that to be, because I'm going to stitch right over that. I'm going to stitch it with black thread, so it's okay that this is a permanent marker here, but it's important to get it right on the line because you're going to stitch directly over that. So those are the lines that are going to be hidden. So I've got another one here down here for the belly patch, and I did do this in a white chalk, but that's going to show you that the belly piece is going to go right over here. So those are the lines that are going to be hidden because something is going to be appliqued over top of them. Now let's talk about some of these lines that you see around the edges of the piece. So those lines are indicating seam allowance, either where pieces overlap or where they go into the seam allowance of the blocks where you're sewing the blocks together. So in this case, this is the seam allowance at the bottom of the block. You're going to line up this edge with the raw edge at the bottom of your block, and then that's going to be sewn into your seam allowance. So you need to have that allowance there. But what about this piece up here and these little bits around the sides of the head? Well, those are going to show you, for example, I transferred this line at the top of the shoulders, and I transferred this line at the bottom of the head. The head is going to go over the shoulders, and this is going to show you where those line up. So the line here is telling you that that is where it's going to be overlapped, and this is telling you here's how much it's going to be overlapped and exactly where it's going to be placed. So this is less important for you to transfer. It's very important for you to transfer if it's really important to you that your block look exactly like my sample blocks. But you might want to turn the panda's head a little bit and make him looking kind of quizzical off to the side. That's totally fine. You can do that. In that case, don't mark these bits. So that is your choice. Same thing with the ears. Let me grab, here, let me quickly cut one of these ears out so you can see what we're doing here. So on this ear, I did the same thing that you saw me do underneath that, where the head and the neck join. So I've marked here where the ear piece goes underneath, and then I've marked a line here showing how deep it goes underneath. So if you want to position your ears exactly where I have my ears, you can use those two guides to get those ears positioned exactly where mine are. Okay, so the important thing to know for this is those are not as important lines to transfer, so only do them if you want that help positioning things. There are a couple of places where the eyes will look right, but there's a lot of places where the eyes will look wrong. There's a couple of places where the ears will look wrong, like it will look wrong if you put his ears up here and if you put them way down here. But there's a huge range of where it actually looks just fine to have the ears. And if you want to be able to play with it a little bit and make it your own, that's a good place where you can add a little bit of variety. And in that case, don't use those markings. If you want to use the markings, make sure you use something that can be erasable. So this little line here may show a little bit when you're done. So I used chalk here, and I would recommend using chalk on yours. I used a pencil here just because it was for a video and I wanted you to be able to see it. I would not use a pencil here. Normally I would use a piece of chalk. So also those, and chalk lines can be brushed away. Pencil lines can be erased with an eraser, but sometimes it leaves just kind of just a little schmutzy part. So I don't recommend pencil unless it's the only thing that will show up. So that gives you all of the guidelines on the eye, on all of those different inner markings. Remember, the ones that are in the interior of the piece are the ones that are showing the placement of things that are going to be appliqued over them, and you can be less fussy with the tools that you use for that because those markings are going to be covered up. All of the markings around the edge of the pieces are showing the amount of seam allowance and where those pieces are positioned. They are less important, so you can ignore them if you want to. If you do choose to use them, you'll want to make sure that you use them with some kind of erasable marker. One more thing to note about the Panda before we move on and actually assemble the block is Panda. I made here like a little fantasy Panda that's bright blue, but if you were doing your Panda in a more of a black and white, which I have a sample that I'm going to show you, these black eyes will not show up very well on black eye patches or even on very dark gray eye patches. I have a tutorial that shows you how to layer a couple of different ways that you can make those eyes show up. One is to outline them with lighter thread instead of the black thread. That's a little hard to do because that thread is very visible, so only do that if you're very comfortable outlining small pieces like this. An easier way to do it is what I've done here. I'm going to pull this actually as close as I can get it without it going blurry. So on this one, I layered a gray piece. I actually used gray for his face instead of white, and I used a matching gray piece to go around that eye, and then I layered the darker eye on top of it. What you'll want to do in that case is don't fuse that black eye on top yet. So fuse everything in place except for the top smaller black eyes. Then you're going to outline the lighter gray eye in matching thread before you put that black eye on. That way, you see, you've left yourself just a very thin bit to outline around, and if you have your black one in there, you've left yourself a pretty small path to follow, and if you mess up, it's going to be really visible. So just make things easier on yourself. Don't fuse these black eyes down until you outline these wider, larger eyes in matching thread. And the Panda piece actually already has two eye patterns. So you'll see here I have large eyes, and up here you have small eyes. If you're using traditional Panda colors, so you're going to have black eyes on black, use that large eyes pattern for the whites that go behind the eyes, and the small eyes pattern for the smaller black eyes inside. If you're not doing black eye patches, now let me see if I can, these guys stuck, then you want to use the larger eye patterns for the eyes. The smaller eyes, just without the whites behind them, look too small. So if you're not going to use black eye patches, use the larger eye pattern for the black eyes. Now, next up, I'm going to show you how to layer this all together and fuse it down, and then I'll give you a quick outline of how to outline stitch it. Okay, I just peeled off the backing paper to have everything ready for us to layer in, but I realized I forgot to mention, if you're using the paper-backed fusible adhesive, you want to trace all those face markings before you peel the paper off. While it's peeled on, it's very easy. You can just hold it up into a window and trace the light shining through will make those lines show up really, really well. If you're using an electric cutter, you're going to have the pieces without any markings inside, but you can still trace them. What you'll need to do is take the pattern piece that's laid out for fusible adhesive and print that just on regular paper, and then put it in your window face down. I've printed on scrap paper here, but you're going to tape that in the window face down, and then the same thing, hold your pieces over it, and the light shining through will allow you to trace those really clearly. The reason that you have to do it face down is because the cutting machines want you to cut the fabric with the adhesive down and the fabric side up, which means these are not reversed. So the SVG file is not reversed, but by flipping it over and putting it face down in the window, that reverses it, and then you'll be able to see right where the pieces need to go, and you can trace any of the lines that you want to trace. So here's how we layer the piece in. So I always start with the piece that lines up with the bottom edge of the block. Let me scooch this up just a little bit so you can see that. And I always line the raw edge of my piece up with the raw edge of my block. If you have it up here, your guy's going to look like he's been chopped off at the shoulders. If you put him down here, it's going to look like a photo where you've just cropped out the rest of him, but nobody chopped him off at the shoulders. If for some reason you really want to have the faces centered in your block, leave the shoulder piece off, and you can probably then print the faces bigger, but that'll be more of a kind of a graphic design layout, and it won't look beheaded because nothing is chopped off. It'll just look like an illustration just of the face. So I want mine to look like photos that are just cropped in there, so I lay that edge up with the bottom edge of the block. Then I'm going to lay the head in, and I'm going to use those guidelines. So I've got a guideline here that shows how much the head is going to overlap the shoulders, and I have a guideline here showing which part of the head overlaps, so that I can very easily position that exactly like the pattern is. Again, if you want to play with having his head tipped one way or the other, go for it. Just don't put that marking on there. I've got the belly piece here, and I've got a marking here. I made the marking for where that is going to be positioned, and the raw edge of the belly piece is also going to be lined up with the raw edge of the bottom of the block, and that line at the bottom of the belly piece is going to line up with the seam allowance line at the bottom of the shoulders. So that's good. Now let's get some ears in there. So I've got an ear piece here. I've got a line at the bottom of the ear and a line on the face. And I'm just going to slide that ear underneath using those guides where to put it. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And again, if you want to play a little bit with where the ears sit on the head, don't worry about those lines. Now we're getting into some of the important lines. So I'm going to put the eye patches in, and I'm just going to lay them right over those markings. And then I'm going to put the eyes right where my eyes are marked. And again, I marked them with slightly smaller circles, so I don't have to be completely controlling about where they go, but that gives me a really good placement. And I'm going to put my nose so that the point of the nose lines up with the line for the stitching on the mouth. And that is ready to be fused in place and outline stitched. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back and talk you through the outline stitching that I did. All right, here he is all finished. I also erased all of the lines that were visible before, so you can't see those overlapping lines and seam lines anymore. And I know somebody's probably going to ask, when I do have to use a pencil instead of chalk, I just use a Ticonderoga pencil. That's my favorite kind of pencil, but I don't use the Ticonderoga eraser. It's a darker eraser, and it works great on paper, but I find that it can leave a mark on fabric. So I'll usually use a white artist's eraser. I have a retractable one here that I like to use for lines, and I also have just a brick one. This is the same kind of eraser that I use to clean my cutting mat. If you get batting in the cuts, this works great to get them out. I have a video showing that. So when I do have to mark with a pencil instead of chalk, these are the erasers I use, and I find that they are much less likely to leave any kind of a mark on the fabric. So I got all the placement lines erased, and I got everything outlined, and now I'm going to walk you through the outlining that I did. I always try and really plan my outlining out ahead of time so that I don't have to stop and tie knots and start again. And I like to go around all of the pieces 3 times, and I try not to go exactly on my line everywhere. Let me show you on here. I like to have a little bit of variation showing. I like it to look a little bit like it's my scribbly, scratchy sketchbook. So here's the path that I took for the panda. I started stitching around his head just a little bit before you get to the shoulders, and I went once around the head. That first time around a shape is always my just kind of like establishing the line pass. Then I went around again, and on the second time around, that's when I do anything that's touching, any appendages like these ears that are coming out. So I'll come past on my second time around the head, and I'll go a little bit past the ears, and then I'll go once, twice, 3 times, and then I double over on the base of the ear and continue around till I go past the bottom of the ear and do the same thing here. Once, twice, 3 times, and then double over the base of the ear. You really can't see the difference between 3 lines of stitching and 4 lines of stitching. So that's a really nice trick for not having to stop and start here. Continue on around. That was the second time around the head. And now I've already done the appendages, so on the third time I just go around again. Keep going past where I started, and now I'm going to pick up the shoulders. And I go 1, 2, 3 times down. And then I just stitched along the edge of the fabric here. Remember, this is going to be trimmed, and then it's going to be in the seam allowance, so you're never going to see anything that's happening down there. So I went once down there, and then once, twice, 3 times around his belly. Same thing, once down here, and then once, twice, 3 times, and then I tie it off. So with that one starting and stopping, I was able to do all of the pieces that are touching each other. So what I'm left with are the kind of floating pieces in the middle of the face, and those, there's not much you can do about it. So for each eye, I start somewhere on the patch and I go 3 times around the eye and then tie it off. 3 times around the eye patch here and tie it off. I only go once around each of the black eyes because I'm stitching black thread on black fabric and you can't see it anyway. So just do 1 stitch, 1 line of stitching to hold it. Now I do the nose and the mouth all in one piece because they're touching. So I start stitching in the nose just a little bit on this straight edge, a little bit before that downstroke starts. And I go once around the nose. That's all I'm going to do around the nose, again, because it's black on black. And then I stitch down, and then over and back. That's 2 passes on that half of the smile, and then up and back. That's 2 passes on that side of the smile. 2 rows of stitching is a little bit of a thinner line than I would like, so I do 4. Because that just makes it easy on something symmetrical like this. So I go up and back again. That's that side of the smile finished. Up and back again. That's this side of the smile finished. And then up to the nose. Now that's only 2 rows of stitching on this downstroke. So I do a quick down and back again, and then I tie it off inside the nose, and that is all done. So this is the Blue Bear. On this one I used the muted rainbow for the background block, and this is the rainbow batiks for both shades of blue on his body. I've got another version that is awfully cute, I think. This one is the rainbow batiks. Instead of for the bear, I used them for the background, and I know this is a gray, but it's in the rainbow batiks bundle. And then this is 2 different fat quarter bundles that I use a lot together, and I really like them together. This is the Dots fat quarter bundle, and this is the Gingham Play fat quarter bundle. And those are coordinated so that those colors work really well together, and I like to use them as light and darks for the same of the same color. And then I'm going to go back and show you one more time this one that is the realistic Panda Bear. So this uses the Rainbow Sherbet fabric bundle for the background, and then the dark gray and the super light gray that I used for the Panda are both from the Warm Neutrals fabric bundle. Again, this pattern is available for free. Go to shinyhappyworld.com, click on free patterns, and you'll find the Panda pattern there. Happy stitching, and I'll see you next time.